The story begins in the eastern Baltic in 793 AD. This is where we first meet Ragnar. The show begins on the battlefield, where our hero easily dispatches 3 enemies with the help of his brother, Rollo. Just then, Ragnar witnesses a dark figure, supposedly Odin, as Ragnar whispers to himself. That figure is taking up the souls of fallen warriors to Valhalla. Ragnar sees such things often, but others do not. Our hero is a family man with a son named Bjorn who is coming of age when he should be taken to the main village. Though the mother, Lagertha, asks Ragnar if Bjorn should visit the main hall next year, Ragnar doesn't listen to her. He says that Bjorn is now ready to be an adult. So, father and son make their way to the main village where, as explained, they'll witness justice through the Viking court system, and the chief of the village, called Earl, will decide where the clan will continue for summer raids. While camped out in the woods, our hero teaches his son the lessons he has learned. Back at Ragnar's home, Lagertha is set upon by 2 bandits, who know that the men have left her all alone. They clearly aren't looking for food or drink, they also want to satiate their inside desires. But after 30 seconds, it's clear Lagertha wasn't chosen simply because of her looks. She says to those men that they couldn't overpower her if they tried for 100 years. Then, she quickly dispatches the 2 intruders in typical Viking fashion. Meanwhile, the father and the son have arrived at the village, where Ragnar is met by his brother and ship companion, Rollo. While at the tavern, Ragnar reveals a device to his brother that would guarantee a course to the west. Something as simple as discovering a compass is explained with a genius piece of wisdom. Ragnar proposes to use sunlight to get directions towards the west of the vast sea. And if there is no sunlight on some days, Ragnar has a snowflake mirror to find out where the sun is behind the clouds. In the courthouse of the village, we meet Earl Haraldson as he presides over his people, passing judgment on a common thief and a murderer. There Bjorn gets a good look at the life of a Viking as he has to help sentence the man to death and watch as he is beheaded. Bjorn then receives his arm ring, swearing loyalty to Earl Haraldson as a child of 12. In Viking status he is now a man. Then, before the feast, Earl Haraldson explains that the summer raiding party will once again head east towards Russia. As Ragnar hears this, he is compelled to stand and explain that the path should be west, towards new lands, as they have been raiding east always but could not find anything worthy there ever. Moreover, everyone has listened to stories about the wealth of the west, but they have not yet found a route to the west. Immediately irritated by anyone questioning him, the Earl silences Ragnar and explains that they are his ships, his lands, and it is his decision. Later, the Earl summons Ragnar into his private chamber, has clearly heard enough talk of the west, and asks Ragnar not to mention the west again ever. It's a one-way conversation that clearly irritates both men.
Now that's the end of the matter.
When the Earl dismisses Ragnar, he says to his accomplice that he doesn't trust Ragnar. Worshipping and fearing the gods, but always seeking their counsel, Ragnar and Bjorn go see a shaman. He is an eyeless old man who's surrounded by bones and runes. He tells Ragnar to go ask the gods himself his next course of action. On the other hand, a glimpse into the Earl's backstory is shown through a flashback where he awakes from the nightmare of seeing his sons buried in a shallow grave. We then meet Ragnar's friend Floki, a crazy old boat builder. He has been hired by Ragnar to construct a boat that would withstand the long, arduous journey west. Floki has engineering acumen as he explains the construction of the boat. When Ragnar arrives home, he asks Lagertha if anything transpired during their absence. She doesn't tell him anything about the robbers but instead says she needs to ride him like a bull. Later, Ragnar tells Rollo the boat is nearly completed, and they need to start looking for a crew to sail the ship west. It will be a difficult task, as not many would go against the Earl's wishes. While Ragnar goes outside to relieve himself, Rollo confesses his love for Lagertha, and she angers him by denying him her affection. Outside the home, Ragnar is once again visited by the vision of a dark, cloaked figure he saw on the battlefield. The sign that he has been waiting for is that he is doing the right thing. The next day, Floki, Rollo, and Ragnar test the ship in the water. As they unfurl the sails, the ship travels smoothly across a river, and Floki gleefully sings his own praises for building this piece of art. On top of a hillside as the 3 sail the ship, the Earl's spy watches them. On the following day, both Ragnar and Rollo gather men for their raiding party to the west. They visit Alec Martin, a trusted friend of Ragnar, who gathers some young men for the upcoming west raid.
You're here. Because you have nothing better to do.
They all swear an oath on their common ring to keep the raid a secret because Earl Haraldson will try his best to stop them. Ragnar informs everyone about his plans and explains that he has a capable boat built by Floki. Despite the Earl's orders, they plan to head west to raid, which requires the support of many comrades. Ragnar promises everyone an equal share of the loot if they succeed in this raid. A man named Canute asks Ragnar what will happen if there's nothing worth looting or if it's just water everywhere. Ragnar replies that they'll raid a place called England in the west, and this is the perfect time to try something new and adventurous to please the gods. Everyone decides to join him. Returning home, Ragnar's wife, Lagertha, persistently asks when they'll leave for the west. She also wants to join him as she is an expert fighter, but Ragnar is reluctant to let her join as he wants her to stay back, manage the farm, and take care of the children. He offers her the option to go in his place, but it's too risky for both of them to go on this raid. Meanwhile, something unusual happens at the Earl's home. The man who informed the Earl about Ragnar's secret meeting stares at the Earl's wife with lustful eyes. The Earl offers him a night with his wife, Siggy, to test his loyalty. The man takes the bait and sneaks into Siggy's bedroom, but before he can do anything, the Earl catches him and sentences him to death. Early the next morning, Ragnar plans to finally leave for the west with his young men. Ragnar and his party then embark westward in search of new lands. The Earl is not concerned as he believes there's no land in the west, and they'll perish on their own. On the way, Ragnar uses his sundial, which is made of ice, to confirm their direction. They face massive storms, but Floki's sturdy ship withstands the high waves. Morning arrives, and one of Ragnar's team members loses hope. Convinced there's no land, he accuses Ragnar of fooling them, but Ragnar kills him. Soon, they spot seagulls, a sign of nearby land. After weeks of sailing, Ragnar and his team finally reach Northumbria, England. Meanwhile, in Northumbria, England, Christian monks are painting Bibles, as printing presses haven't been invented yet. One monk, Athelstan, sees Viking ships on the horizon and recalls a prophecy that monsters will emerge from the sea to destroy the house of God, but his senior dismisses him.
You will do as I order.
The monks are shocked at the Vikings' arrival, so they hide in a nearby church. The Vikings prepare for an attack, applying a light ceremonial blood makeup around their eyes and ears to look more intimidating. As they storm in, the terrified monks are dragged out and killed. In one part of the church, they find treasure, gold, silver, and jewels. Ragnar encounters Athelstan hiding behind a table. Athelstan speaks to him in his language, invoking the Norse god Odin's name to spare him. Seeing this, Ragnar is intrigued that this monk speaks his language, so he spares him. Rollo is disappointed to find no women in the church and only monks. He also wants to kill Athelstan, but Ragnar saves him, planning to make him a slave. After raiding the church and causing havoc, the Vikings take several monks and load up on treasure before heading back to Kattegat. Now, Ragnar and his group are returning after a spree of looting, accompanied by Athelstan and a few of his priest companions. Ragnar asks Athelstan if the place they came from is called England, and Athelstan confirms that it is indeed England. Athelstan also explains that there's a country named Northumbria within England, where they came from. Ragnar and his team reach Kattegat, where everyone welcomes them like heroes. Ragnar meets Canute here and, in a light-hearted way, pokes fun at Canute's success, meaning that he has no grudge against Canute even after the betrayal. Ragnar and his team are immediately summoned by Earl for an important matter. Earl questions Ragnar and his team about the raid, and Ragnar tells him that they came from across the sea, where they found a massive treasure without much effort. However, Ragnar doesn't share his navigation techniques with Earl. Earl, who is extremely cunning, keeps all of Ragnar's treasure for himself. When they protest, Earl simply retorts that they themselves said looting the treasure was child's play, so they should be able to repeat it. However, Earl tries to be generous by saying that Ragnar can only take one item from the hall's treasure. Although there are many valuable things to choose from, Ragnar selects Athelstan, and everyone laughs at his decision. Little do they know that Ragnar's choice will be a game-changer in Viking history. Outside, Rollo and Ragnar have a minor argument. Rollo asks Ragnar why he didn't say anything to Earl when he was taking all their treasure. Ragnar explains that if they hadn't obeyed Earl's orders, he would have had them killed right there, and that's precisely what Earl wanted. In the evening, Ragnar, along with Athelstan, returns home. He introduces the priest to everyone. Lagertha feels disappointed at the lack of treasure, but Ragnar explains all the conditions to her. Having been alone for so long, Lagertha feels rather lonely and directly takes Ragnar to the bedroom. Later that night, Ragnar is curious about learning more about Athelstan's country, so he asks many questions. Athelstan tells Ragnar more about England, informing him about its 4 kingdoms and their kings. Also, Ragnar learns about donations and why people offer gold and silver to Jesus. The next day, in the marketplace, Ragnar approaches Earl, suggesting that his slave informed him about other towns in England where they could raid and amass wealth. Earl wants to go on the raid himself, but Ragnar convinces him to let them go instead, as it would not be a safe journey. Earl, however, imposes a condition that one of his trusted men must accompany Ragnar's raiding party, and that man is Canute. Canute's job is to observe the devices Ragnar uses for navigation and his methods for heading the Western world. Back at home, Ragnar, showing mercy, frees Athelstan, but Athelstan lacks the courage to leave, knowing that if he encounters any other Viking, he'll be dead in minutes. Ragnar tells Lagertha that they will soon embark on another raid to the west. Lagertha wishes him the best of luck, but this time, Ragnar decides to take her along, asking Athelstan to take care of the children. This reveals that Ragnar now trusts Athelstan deeply, considering him a part of his family. Athelstan doesn't want this responsibility, but he has no choice against Ragnar's wishes. Just before the next raiding journey begins, everyone harshly scolds Canute, as many still don't trust him. In just a few days, they reach Northumbria, a bit farther from their previous destination. Here, Ragnar and his team encounter some patrol soldiers. Ragnar tries speaking to them, having learned a little of their language from Athelstan. Ragnar claims to be a traitor and wants to trade with them. That's why the Vikings are invited by the soldiers to meet King El of Northumbria. But Rollo feels uneasy, suspecting it to be a trap. Ragnar wanted to talk with them, but things quickly escalated, and all the soldiers were killed in the blink of an eye in the hands of Vikings. However, one soldier who manages to escape will inform the others about this invasion. Now, Ragnar and his companions decide to leave one of the English soldiers they fought alive to extract information from him. With his help, Ragnar's group reaches a nearby English town. Rollo suggests attacking immediately, but Ragnar orders everyone to rest for the day, which confuses Rollo. He asks why they're waiting if they're going to attack anyway, to which Ragnar replies, "What day is it?" The captured soldier answers, "Saturday," so Ragnar says they'll attack the next day. Meanwhile, the soldier who managed to escape reaches King El and informs him about the Vikings. Initially, King El is puzzled about who these people are and why they're attacking, but after some discussion, they conclude that these might be the same people who recently raided a church. Enraged, King El orders Ragnar and his group to be eliminated, but the soldier who had seen Vikings fighting is not willing to go again and fight with them because he is scared of their big giant stature and fierce fighting skills. He says that he first time saw someone fighting with no fear of death in his eyes. The following day, Ragnar's comrades anxiously wait for his orders. As church bells begin to ring, signaling that everyone is gathered inside for prayers, Ragnar announces that it's time to attack. The town is nearly empty since everyone is at the church for prayers, where weapons are also left outside, as they're not allowed inside the holy space. So, Vikings have no resistance in that town. Inside the church, the townsfolk are peacefully praying when Ragnar's group enters, causing fear among them. Ragnar calmly asks them to let them do their work, promising they won't harm anyone if left alone. The Vikings proceeded to take all the valuables from the church, and some, like Rollo and Canute, began raiding homes, too. There, Canute tries to assault a woman, but Lagertha steps in to stop him. When Canute attempts to force himself on Lagertha, she retaliates and kills him in the process. When they leave the town, Ragnar learns of Canute's death and is furious, knowing Canute was a trusted man of the Earl. The consequences could be severe if the Earl finds out about his death. As they return, a section of King El's army ambushes them, but despite being heavily outnumbered, the Vikings display courage and tactical skill, defeating the English forces within no time. The terrified generals flee and report back to King El, who's infuriated at their cowardice but understands the Vikings are formidable opponents. Upon the return of Vikings to Kattegat, they receive a hero's welcome, but the Earl grows suspicious when he doesn't see Canute among them. Ragnar eventually admits that he killed Canute to protect Lagertha when Canute was trying to force himself on her. Hearing this, the Earl arrests Ragnar for further proceedings against him. Later, the Earl attempts to sow discord between Ragnar and his brother Rollo. He suggests Rollo that anyone who marries his daughter, Theri, will inherit his wealth. So it's an opportunity for Rollo to ditch his brother and become an influential and wealthy man by marrying the Earl's daughter. In return, the Earl just wants a statement from Rollo against his brother. Later, in front of everyone, the Earl declares Canute as his brother and demands a trial for Ragnar. At the trial, Rollo steps forward as a witness. For a moment, it seems he might betray Ragnar, but ultimately, he defends him, leading to Ragnar's acquittal. That night, they celebrate their victory and the acquittal of Ragnar from the hands of the Earl. There, Lagertha is worried about Rollo's words as she can see his deep intentions for his brother through his words as a witness. The festivities are interrupted by an ambush arranged by the Earl, resulting in the deaths of some of Ragnar's friends. Ragnar survives and now plans to do something against this Earl. After the previous incident, Ragnar can't stay calm and continues training to make himself stronger. Meanwhile, Earl Haraldson is preparing for a small military operation. One day, while Ragnar is out hunting, the Earl, with his men, attacks Ragnar's village. This move makes little sense since the village technically belongs to the Earl, but it's likely done to prevent Ragnar's neighbors from helping him. Lagertha, Athelstan, and Ragnar's daughter Gyda hide in the house, waiting for Ragnar's return. Soon, Ragnar hears shouting from the forest. An intense action scene unfolds, and Ragnar signals his family to escape through a secret entrance toward the river. He stays behind to confront the Earl's men. Then he himself comes out to surrender as he is badly injured, too. But when a man of the Earl approaches him, Ragnar attacks the man and takes his horse to run from that place. Meanwhile, his family has boarded a boat and is waiting for Ragnar as per his instructions. Their house, animal flock, and farms have been set on fire on the order of the Earl. Ragnar is still being chased by some men, so he throws himself into the water from a cliff. However, Athelstan dives into the water and takes Ragnar out. They then go to Ragnar's friend Floki's house, where Ragnar's treatment starts immediately. Meanwhile, the Earl seizes all of Ragnar's property and invites another Earl to marry his beautiful daughter Theri, a move that angers his wife, Siggy, as she knows nothing of the arrangement. Bjarni, despite being old, is attracted to Theri. The Earl justifies this marriage as a way to secure their future, given the uncertain life they lead. He will get connections and support from the old Earl after giving him his daughter. Later, at a grand wedding for the Earl's daughter, Rollo tries to impress the Earl by letting him join in more raids, but the Earl brushes him off. He thinks that Rollo will again betray him if he gets the opportunity. At this, Rollo initially plans to leave, but the Earl's men catch him, giving him a brutal beating before bringing him to the Earl, who questions his loyalty. News of this reaches Ragnar, who, despite his pain, instructs Floki to deliver a challenge to the Earl on his behalf. This move puts the Earl in a difficult position, as rejecting the challenge would damage his reputation and prevent him from gaining honor in their afterlife's sacred place Valhalla. Since Ragnar was already injured, and to permanently end the matter with Ragnar, Earl decides to accept the challenge. The next day, Ragnar arrives limping on the ground for the challenge, and the crowd's reactions are mixed. Some support him, while others oppose him. The bald advisor of the Earl explains the rules of the duel. Both Earl and Ragnar will receive 2 shields, but they can bring as many weapons as they like. The duel begins, and Earl quickly breaks Ragnar's shield and weapon, severely injuring him. Despite his injuries, Ragnar manages to land a powerful blow on Earl, which weakens him. As Earl lies dying, he imagines seeing Odin and tells Ragnar that he will go to Valhalla. In response, Ragnar cuts Earl's wrist, granting him a warrior's death. Siggy runs to save her husband, but Earl is already prepared to die, saying he will finally join his sons in Valhalla. Earl's bald advisor orders Ragnar's death, but no one obeys him, as they recognize Ragnar as the new Earl. Rollo then kills the advisor, who had tormented him a lot earlier. Also, Siggy kills her daughter's impotent husband and acknowledges Ragnar as the new Earl, as do the rest of the crowd.
Hail, Earl Ragnar!
Not long after, Ragnar is ceremoniously declared Earl, with the main characters swearing allegiance to him. Later, an elderly man named Tick requests that Ragnar include him in the next raid to England, hoping to die in battle as he has already lost many friends and wishes to reach Valhalla. Earl Ragnar grants him his wish.
This summer, we shall have more ships to go west.
When his brother Rollo comes to swear his allegiance to new Earl, Ragnar says that it is not needed as he knows that Rollo will always stay with his brother no matter what are the circumstances. The following day, Earl Haraldson receives a grand farewell. Although Haraldson was once Ragnar's enemy, Ragnar explains to Athelstan that Haraldson was no ordinary man, he was a great individual and fighter who accomplished many feats in his youth. Ragnar places Haraldsson's body on a beautiful boat with a slave girl who joins him in death to reach Valhalla. Meanwhile, Siggy is worried for her daughter. She contemplates fleeing, as the new earl typically mistreats the old earl's family. However, Rollo comes there and assures Siggy that she and her daughter will be safe, as Ragnar has no grudges against the family of his enemies. They are free to live in the village. Also, Roll hints to Siggy that she can become an earl's wife again. Siggy is uncertain, but Rollo clarifies his desire to become earl with her support. It becomes evident that Rollo has his own agenda. Time passes, and winter arrives. Ragnar and his allies prepare for the next raid. As the season changes, Ragnar sets sail for England, now with 3 boats instead of 1. The Vikings navigate rivers until news reaches Northumbria's King El, who angrily throws his commander into a pit of snakes for failing to prevent the Vikings' advance earlier, and now he is again scared of the Vikings. Determined to eliminate the invaders, El gathers his army once again to fight with the Vikings. Ragnar has now become more powerful and arrives in Northumbria with his entire army. Ragnar sets up camp with his troops in a Northumbrian village, causing the locals to panic and flee. King El, frustrated by this, calls upon his brother, Ethelred, the commander of the Northumbrian army. Ethelred assures El that they will soon rid themselves of the Vikings. Ethelred arrives with his troops near Ragnar's camp, and his soldiers advise him to attack the Vikings immediately. However, Ethelred has other plans and decides to wait for the Vikings to settle first. Rollo, too, suggests attacking right away, but Ragnar, a strategic thinker, tells Rollo to be patient for the appropriate time. Later that night, as Ethelred's soldiers sleep, the Vikings set one of their camps on fire and seize their weapons. By the time the English soldiers realize this, it's too late. Ethelred, instead of fighting back, sits down to pray, and by the time he finishes, the Vikings have defeated his entire army. Eventually, Ragnar learns that Ethelred is El's brother, and news reaches El that Ethelred has lost the battle. Some advisors of King El speculate that the Vikings were sent by God as punishment, while others view them as demons, and a few wise people recognize them as humans who are there for treasure. So, the wise men also suggested that the king should give the treasure to the Vikings so that they would not kill anyone else in England. The following day, Ragnar comes to the castle with Ethelred as a captive. El's soldiers grow fearful, and one of them asks Ragnar what he wants in exchange for Ethelred. Ragnar doesn't show his demand as he wants to meet the king first. So Ragnar and his companions are invited to a feast party in the hall of the king. At first, Rollo thinks that it is a trap and they should not go inside the castle, but Ragnar has Ethelred as his hostage so King El cannot harm them. At the dinner, Ragnar says he will accept 200 kilograms of silver and will leave Ethelred in England in return. Though the demand is high, King El agrees but adds a condition that one of Ragnar's men must convert to Christianity to earn the English's trust. Rollo volunteers, and the next day, he undergoes the conversion ceremony. Back in Kattegat, Lagertha is managing everything well. She meets Siggy, who asks to serve her. Lagertha accepts her under her service and says that she will be safe here. In England, again, King El plays a double game with the Vikings. He sends the empty boxes of the treasure to them with a large army to fight with the Vikings. But Ragnar and his companions are ready for it as they bravely fight the unexpected war and win over it. Also then, Ragnar kills the brother of King El, Ethelred, and sends his body on a horse back to the castle in a miserable condition. Now, King El has no other choice but to give them the treasure, so he does the same to get rid of the Vikings. The Vikings, now richer with the ransom, prepare to leave. Meanwhile, El's soldiers deliver the ransom and quickly depart. It is full of gold and silver coins this time. King El, seeing this, vows that he will take revenge on Ragnar one day. So, Ragnar brings back a lot of loot from England. But when he returns, he feels heartbroken upon learning the news. Lagertha has lost her unborn baby. Later, Ragnar calls Athelstan for a certain task, explaining that every 9 years, they travel to a temple atop a mountain to make offerings to Odin and all the gods to ensure their protection. Originally, Ragnar wasn't planning to go this year due to his responsibilities, but because of all he's been through, especially his child's death, he feels compelled to attend. Ragnar shares his sorrow with Athelstan, deeply mourning his son's death. He asks Athelstan to come with him. Athelstan hesitates initially but eventually agrees. Everyone brings their offerings for the gods because only a few people will go to the temple. Lagertha notices the sadness on Ragnar's face, which is deeply troubled because, while the gods granted him the title of Earl, they took away his son. They have been trying for a long time for a son without success. The following day, Ragnar's entire family, along with many villagers, heads to Uppsala, where all the rituals will take place. The journey from Kattegat to Uppsala is stunning, with beautiful scenery shown along the way. Upon arriving at Uppsala, the villagers engage in various sacred rituals, thanking Odin and the other gods, and praying for blessings according to their wishes. Lagertha prays to the fertility goddess Freya, asking for a son, even if it means sacrificing her own sight. Also, Ragnar prays a god to let him meet the woman who will give birth the sons of Ragnar. The Vikings enjoy their time at Uppsala, as the gods themselves visit their devotees every 9 years. Athelstan observes that there are 9 of everything being sacrificed, but he notices an empty pan and questions Ragnar about it. Ragnar explains that this space is for the human sacrifices offered to the gods. The next morning, a new character, King Horik, arrives, and he is impressed by Ragnar's reputation, acknowledging him as a powerful earl. In return for his loyalty, Ragnar asks King Horik for his army's support, as he is not content with just reaching England. He wants to explore further lands. Athelstan had mentioned a wealthy country called Francia, modern-day France, which intrigues Ragnar. Horik agrees to give his assistance for the journey of Ragnar to the west, but he has his own territorial disputes, so he wants Ragnar to resolve these conflicts first. Ragnar gets his first assignment from King Horik, where he has to remove Earl Jarl Borg from a place called Gertegard, clearing the king's land from that earl's occupancy. Basically, he's tasked with driving the Earl Jarl Borg out as quickly as possible. All the Kattegat residents return from the temple, but Ragnar, Floki, Rollo, and the other hunters head to Outlands to complete the assignment. After traveling for days through rain and cold, they finally arrive, but the Earl Jarl Borg doesn't receive them warmly, leaving them outside in the cold. He does this because they represent King Horik, whom the Earl isn't fond of. The Earl Jarl Borg asks Ragnar why he's there, and Ragnar explains they need him to leave the land of King Horik. However, the Earl doesn't agree, refusing any negotiation. When he realizes it's Ragnar Lothbrok standing before him, his attitude changes. With great respect, he offers Ragnar and his men dry clothes and a meal, promising they'll discuss the matter the next day. The next day, during their meeting, Ragnar realizes that Earl Jarl Borg has no plans to leave King Horik's land willingly, so he shares King Horik's offer. The Earl is offered a substantial price for the land, but he still refuses. Ragnar warns him that this could mean war, and Earl Jarl Borg, though wary, suggests that King Horik and he should share the land instead, as it holds not just value but treasure, including gold and silver. Since Ragnar lacks the authority to make this decision, he sends Floki back to King Horik to discuss the proposal. Ragnar then goes off sightseeing in that village while Rollo stays behind. Meanwhile, in Kattegat, Lagertha is restless after returning from the temple and seeks answers from a wise man, but she receives a cryptic advice which she could not understand herself. Back at Gertegard, Earl Jarl Borg tells Rollo the story of his brother's betrayal to secure power. He is trying to plant seeds of doubt in Rollo's mind against his brother. Rollo listens, feeling the sting of comparison to Ragnar's fame and respect, which he lacks. Elsewhere, Ragnar's scouts spot a mermaid in a lake and get distracted, only to be caught by the guards. The mermaid is actually Princess Aslog, who now wants an apology from the leader of the scouts. When Ragnar hears about the incident, he playfully invites the mermaid to his camp for an apology but sets clever conditions for her arrival. The next day, she arrives, and Ragnar is captivated by her beauty, even offering to escort her to Aes Tree, the sacred place they are headed to. At the same time, a disease strikes Kattegat, causing death and despair, as many villagers, including Lagertha's daughter Gyda, succumb to it. Lagertha has to burn many of his villagers' dead bodies due to this disease. Athelstan, Siggy, Gyda, and Theri get infected too. Athelstan and Siggy make it out of the disease, but Gyda and Theri succumb to death. Back to Aslog, who continues attracting Ragnar, and one night they sleep together. The next morning, Ragnar's son Bjorn confronts his father for betraying Lagertha by sleeping with another woman. Ragnar says that he could not control himself. So Bjorn takes a vow from Ragnar that he will never do this again, and Ragnar complies, as at that night when Aslog again comes to the bed of Ragnar, he forbids her, saying that he can't do this. The following day, Aslog tells Ragnar that she's carrying his son, which brings him some peace amid the sorrow. Meanwhile, Floki meets King Horik and explains that the Earl wants to share the land with him, but King Horik wants the whole land for himself, so he denies the offer altogether. Floki returns with King Horik's response, refusing any land-sharing deal and urging Ragnar to depart without compromise. Seeing no peaceful solution, Ragnar prepares for the inevitable battle, while the Earl Jarl Borg, having swayed Rollo to his side, looks forward to the clash. Rollo, secretly envious of Ragnar's success, has been convinced to join the Earl Jarl Borg in fighting against his own brother. Both parties gather at the battlefield. On one side, Ragnar is fighting along with King Horik, while on the other side, Rollo is fighting with Earl Jarl Borg, having dreams of becoming an Earl one day. We kick off with the one-eyed Viking riding across the battlefield. He goes up to Rollo and gives him one last shot to back out, but Rollo's got no plans to change sides. So, it doesn't take long before Ragnar and King Horik's troops clash head-on with Borg's warriors. Rollo also dives right in, going after Floki. It's tense, but Floki manages to save his life after a few battle scars. Then there's this one brutal scene where Rollo takes things up a notch, running a spear right through one-eyed Viking. Both brothers stare at each other down on the battlefield. And then, Rollo, in a moment of last-minute regret, steps back and admits he can't fight his own brother. But even with that, Borg isn't having it. He's rejecting any deal King Horik throws at him, so it looks like they're all ready to clash again until Ragnar calls a halt. Ragnar pulls out some logic, telling everyone there's a whole lot more land and riches out in the west. Why not focus on those riches instead of tearing each other apart right here? This proves to be helpful in avoiding the clash again, and they have decided to march to the west now. Back home, though, things have taken a dark turn. The disease has taken Ragnar's daughter, Gyda, and now the village is trying to recover. Also, Ragnar's brother is going to be executed now. Then we get a bit of drama on the family front. Bjorn tells his mother everything about his father and Princess Aslog. Hearing this, Lagertha doesn't waste any time confronting Ragnar. He tries to brush it off like it was nothing, but Lagertha's not letting it go that easy and takes a vow from Ragnar that he would never see that princess again. Then, Ragnar advises his son not to be so engulfed in the emotions and focus on his training. Back in the village, Siggy tries to comfort Rollo by putting a warm blanket on him, but Rollo says that he is a dead man now who doesn't feel any cold. The following day, Rollo faces trial for betraying his people. The crowd's pretty much calling for his head, but right when it seems like Rollo's luck has run out, the lawman gives him a pardon as he speaks. The gods want this. People come to Ragnar for not letting Rollo go without punishment, but Ragnar says that he can't do anything against the will of the gods. But then we see a gold coin in the hands of the lawmaker. So it was all a planned trial where Ragnar successfully saved his brother. Then, Ragnar takes time alone to grieve his daughter, and just when he's hoping for some kind of sign from her, the pregnant Aslog arrives there in a boat. Lagertha is not happy seeing her there, but she still welcomes her inside. Also, Floki is on the bed due to injuries he got from the beating of Rollo. He doesn't like the idea of leaving Rollo, that's why. But Ragnar insists on not looking backward and getting well soon, as he wants Floki to prepare a whole batch of boats for him. Later in a dinner, Ragnar is seated between Aslog and Lagertha. Poor Lagertha tries to keep it together, but then Ragnar drops the bomb, suggesting some kind of sister-wives setup, with Aslog already nodding along like it's no big deal. Lagertha stays calm, but deep down, she's done. The following morning, we see Lagertha packing up her things with Siggy's help. She's made up her mind, and she's leaving. Then Bjorn has to make a choice: stay with his dad or leave with his mom. And in a heart-wrenching moment, he decides to stay with Ragnar. Lagertha hugs her boy and rides off, leaving Ragnar to deal with the consequences. But Ragnar doesn't just let her go. He follows her, acting like he doesn't understand why she'd leave him. And that's when Lagertha, with all the dignity, spells out that Ragnar has humiliated and insulted her. He has left her no choice but to leave and divorce him. Then Ragnar watches as Bjorn comes running after her, deciding he can't let his mom go. He's going with her too, and so, Ragnar hugs his boy and heads back to the village, where a slog is waiting with her big baby bump. It's clear she's here to stay, but Ragnar's family is gone, and nothing will ever be the same. For years have gone by since we last saw Ragnar and the gang. At that time, Ragnar and Aslog had 2 sons, and another child was on the way. Kattegat itself has transformed as new faces fill the village. Meanwhile, Floki's been busy building Ragnar's fleet through the long winter. Even in the cold, Floki pushes himself and takes his place near the fire as if he's earned it, bringing back that chaotic energy. Rollo, on the other hand, has taken a much darker turn. He's drinking heavily, clearly broken after last season's battles. Siggy tries to snap him out of it, holding a hot knife in hand and urging him to decide either pull himself together or end his misery. It's a brutal wake-up call, but if anyone can bring Rollo back, it's Siggy. She asks Rollo to go and requests Ragnar to take him with the next raid to the west. The village bustles with preparations, and Athelstan, our reformed monk, throws himself into training, almost as if he's one of the Vikings now. Ragnar keeps Athelstan grounded, but it's clear he's come a long way from the nervous monk.
To use a weapon.
The excitement in Kattegat builds with King Horik and Jarl Borg's arrival, both eager for the next big raid to the west once the ice melts. And then there's Rollo. He tries to earn forgiveness and asks to join the raid, but Ragnar, though he forgives him, says Rollo's not welcome on the boats. Rollo's heartbreak is clear, even if he did bring it on himself. In typical Viking political fashion, King Horik tells Ragnar he's no longer interested in splitting the raid with Borg and leaves it to Ragnar to break the news himself to Jarl Borg. So Ragnar approaches Jarl Borg and tells him that they are not going together to the west, although they had an agreement earlier. Then Jarl Borg tries to turn Rollo against Ragnar and Horik again after being ditched by them, but Rollo gives his answer by punching his right fist to Borg's face. Rollo's now sticking with his family, no matter the cost. The day of the raid arrives. Ragnar bids farewell to his boys and wife. Then, he boards the ships along with his other companions. Rollo stands alone on a cliff, watching the boats sail off without him. Visibly saddened by his exclusion, the Vikings set out to sea on their dragon-faced ships with bold, red flags flying. Once on shore on the next side, a soldier sees the army and informs others. The Vikings don't have long before local soldiers appear with arrows flying towards the army of Ragnar. The battle's fierce, but the Vikings manage to overpower their opponents. They soon realize that they've landed not in Northumbria but Wessex. Athelstan tells Ragnar that Wessex is home to King Egbert, a man Athelstan describes as just like Ragnar due to his curiosity and intelligence in battle tactics. Knowing Ragnar could mean any number of things: ruthless, ambitious, maybe even a bit bloodthirsty. Either way, it sounds like Egbert's going to be a force to battle with. King Egbert soon learns about the arrival of the Vikings through one of his soldiers who enters the royal bath with his dirty shoes. King Egbert loves taking bath in that pool, so he scolds his soldier for this action. We see a scene in King Egbert's meeting room where he tells his advisors about when he first heard about the Vikings. The Vikings had previously attacked parts of England, causing devastation and looting, and now they have arrived here. King Egbert states that it's now their responsibility to defeat the Vikings and remind them of their place. He orders his son Ethelwulf to gather an army and sends spies to monitor the Vikings' movements. The scene shifts to Ragnar and his men as they reach a place. Ragnar asks Athelstan about the area, and Athelstan explains that it's likely a famous church in Winchester, potentially filled with treasures. Hearing this, the Vikings are delighted and move toward the church. Seeing them, a priest rings the bell, warning everyone. Chaos ensues as people hide and soldiers arrive to confront the Vikings. However, the Vikings easily defeated the soldiers and entered the church, only to find no treasure. Floki blames Athelstan, but Athelstan tells them to check a hidden box in the ground, under which they find a significant treasure. This makes the Vikings happy. Ragnar asks Athelstan how he knew the treasure was hidden there, and Athelstan explains the Christian tradition of burying treasures with saints. The Vikings then spread out, killing the Christians. Athelstan, haunted by memories, finds a room with many Bibles and remembers his past. When When a priest emerges to stop him, Athelstan kills him in his confused mental state. The scene then shifts to Lagertha, who is remarried to a man named Sigvard, but he does not treat her well or respect Bjorn. Lagertha gets angry, and later, Sigvard tries to reconcile. Lagertha endures his mistreatment for her son Bjorn's sake. The scene then shifts to King Horik, who is asked by Ragnar how he finds England. King Horik acknowledges its wealth but notes it's due to the land's fertility. As a former farmer, Ragnar appreciates the land's value, too, and dreams of farming here. Meanwhile, Jarl Borg is celebrating his new marriage. He is also frustrated by Ragnar breaking their agreement, and that's why he plots a revenge on Ragnar behind his back. Just then a messenger from King Egbert comes to talk to Ragnar and his army. He conveys the message to Ragnar that King Egbert wants to meet him, but King Horik gets angry at the proposal just for Ragnar, and so he kills the messenger. During this time, Lagertha is married to another earl while Bjorn is also now a grown man. The husband of Lagertha is not a good person and he often beats Lagertha, which Bjorn knows and wants to stop by himself. But Lagertha stops him always from doing anything against his stepfather. On the other hand, Jarl Borg's men are launching an attack on Kattegat. Only Rollo is the warrior present behind in the village while all others have went on the raid, so Rollo tries to face the large army of Jarl Borg, but they could not prove to be a great resistance. That's why he orders a retreat.
That's right, Rollo, run!
Jarl Borg takes control of Kattegat and starts ruling over its people too. Ragnar's wife, Aslog, takes her children, Siggy, and a few selected people with her and flees from that place along with Rollo. They soon reach a safe place and decide to stay there because it's secluded, but Aslog is unhappy with the location, saying they should move somewhere better. Rollo responds that if they go to a more populated area, people may inform Jarl Borg, who could then come to kill them. So, reluctantly, Aslog agrees to stay. The scene shifts to Jarl Borg, who declares himself the new king of Kattegat and tells the people that they wouldn't have had to suffer if Ragnar hadn't opposed him. Additionally, he offers a reward of gold and silver to anyone who provides information on Ragnar's wife, children, and runaway brother. The scene shifts to Wessex, England, where King Egbert is discussing Ragnar's proposal for negotiations. Head priest Edmund warns King Egbert not to trust the Vikings, as they're brutal people. Egbert agrees they can't be trusted but says they'll exchange hostages as a precaution. He sends his own son, Ethelwulf, as their representative, despite objections from the priest. The Vikings, in turn, send Ragnar to meet King Egbert. Ragnar roams freely through the palace, admiring everything until he reaches King Egbert, who is relaxing in a pool. Egbert invites Ragnar to join him, and they have a conversation in the pool. Egbert asks why the Vikings are still here despite all the loot they've gathered. Ragnar replies that he isn't interested in gold and silver. He's a farmer who wants to see their lands and farming methods. Egbert hints that they might strike a deal if he grants Ragnar some land. When Ragnar comes back to his army, the news arrives that Jarl Borg has seized control over Kattegat, and Ragnar's family is on the runaway. This news prompts Ragnar to pack and prepare to leave. King Horik, however, urges Ragnar to stay and continue negotiating with Egbert, but Ragnar doesn't want to stay anymore. So King Horik suggests that Athelstan should stay to help, as he is the only one who knows the language of Christians after Ragnar. Athelstan agrees to stay in England, and Ragnar departs the next morning, reluctantly leaving Athelstan back. The episode ends on a hopeful note, with Ragnar reuniting with Lagertha, who arrives with Bjorn, who is now grown up and ready to help. A joyful Ragnar embraces his family, glad to see them safe, which brings the episode to a close. Soon, Ragnar reaches the hideout of Floki's wife and asks her about the location of his family. She tells him the location and cautions him about the men of Jarl Borg. Back in Wessex, King Egbert's army attacks the remaining Vikings and arrests Athelstan when he tells them that he is also a Christian. Meanwhile, Ragnar arrives and meets his sons and his wife, Aslog. He has a new son who has a peculiar sign in the eye, so Ragnar calls him Snake in the Eye. Then Ragnar meets his brother Rollo. Ragnar begins planning an attack on Kattegat to reclaim it. However, Rollo suggests that they need a strategy to force Jarl Borg out of Kattegat, as a direct attack might fail. He proposes burning Jarl Borg's grain stores, a plan everyone agrees to. In England, Athelstan is being crucified at the hands of the priests. He is being punished for helping the enemies of Christians. But King Egbert comes there and stops the crucifixion. He also takes Ethelstan with him. The following day, Lagertha and Bjorn, along with their army, came for Ragnar's help in reclaiming his land. Lagertha and Bjorn are warmly welcomed by Ragnar, who has been missing them all this time. Now, they again discuss the plan of burning Jarl Borg's grain stores so that he is left with no supplies for the winter. Ragnar looks at Bjorn and says that he will go with his son for this mission. In the night, they start their mission. Ragnar and his group successfully set fire to Jarl Borg's food stores, fighting off his soldiers in the process. Although Ragnar gets injured, they succeed in their mission, and Jarl Borg is enraged when he learns about it. Afterward, a fierce battle ensues between Ragnar's forces and Jarl Borg's, with Rollo, Floki, and Bjorn fighting valiantly. Jarl Borg's forces could not resist the attack of Ragnar and Lagertha's soldiers. Eventually, Jarl Borg flees in fear, marking Ragnar's victory and bringing much joy to the people of Kattegat. Ragnar's family and his people come back to their lands and claim their properties back to themselves. Lagertha's friends embrace her upon her return to Kattegat. Meanwhile, a soldier arrives with news that King Egbert's forces brutally attacked King Horik's army, and Ragnar learns that Athelstan's whereabouts are unknown. There are rumors that Ethelstan betrayed the Vikings, but Ragnar knows that Athelstan would never do that. When Lagertha considers leaving, Ragnar tells her she is free to go but that Kattegat's doors are always open for her. Eventually, Lagertha allows Bjorn to stay with Ragnar as she returns to her second husband, Sigvard. After a few days, King Horik also arrives in Kattegat with his remaining followers, where a feast is held in his honor. Ragnar asks about King Egbert, and King Horik explains that they had tried to negotiate with King Egbert through Athelstan, but King Egbert betrayed them. He launched an attack on King Horik's army that almost wiped out their army, leaving only a few survivors. Ragnar asks if Athelstan survived, to which Horik replies that if he were lucky, he would have died in battle, as he wasn't of much use to them anyway. Floki supports Horik, too, in his stance about Athelstan. Floki also adds that Athelstan never accepted their gods. Then, Ragnar asks Horik about his next move, and Horik tells him that he plans to return to Wessex to seek revenge against King Egbert. Rollo agrees and wants to accompany them, but Ragnar insists that they must deal with Jarl Borg first and settle things with him. King Horik agrees but proposes they should reconcile with Jarl Borg instead of fighting him. King Horik is thinking that they need allies to fight King Egbert. Ragnar reluctantly agrees, and Rollo is sent to present the offer to Jarl Borg. The next day, we see Bjorn showing affection toward a slave girl named Porin. He is attracted to that girl, but the girl being a slave doesn't show any positive response. Rollo then reaches Jarl Borg's home and tells him about King Horik and Ragnar's proposal to rebuild their alliance. Jarl Borg, in turn, shows Rollo his first wife's skeleton, which he believes guides him in making decisions. Jarl Borg is reluctant to go back to Ragnar's area, thinking that Ragnar will take revenge on him, but Rollo assures him that Ragnar doesn't hold a grudge against anyone, and that's Ragnar's best skill, which makes him unique from all others. He also showed such behavior for his brother Rollo. Listening to this, Jarl Borg ultimately accepts the proposal.
Skål.
While in England, Athelstan, who is now a priest again, is writing the Bible on different pages to save it for the next generation, as asked by King Egbert. When King Egbert arrives to see him, he praises his art and asks him about the Viking gods. Athelstan notes some similarities between Viking gods and Christian beliefs, mentioning Odin's sacrifices, similar to those of Jesus. Egbert then shows Athelstan Roman paintings, explaining that he admires Roman knowledge and wishes to learn from it. After that, King Egbert shows him some Roman scrolls from ancient times, and he wants Athelstan to transcribe them. King Egbert is fond of learning, and he also wants a legacy of knowledge for his descendants after learning from these scriptures. At a feast in Kattegat to welcome Jarl Borg, Ragnar approaches him and says that having him alive is beneficial, and they can achieve great things together. Seeing Ragnar's kind behavior, Jarl Borg assures him of his loyalty. Meanwhile, we see Lagertha, who is badly injured as her husband has beaten him for taking his forces to the Kattegat for the help of her ex-husband. Lagertha's present husband is angry at him for disobeying his orders and taking his men into a fight without his permission. That's why he had beaten her, and now he is going to insult her in front of everyone by showing her naked body. However, Lagertha has her own dignity, so she puts a fork straight into the eye of her husband before he tears her clothes off. She then signals a man standing there named Einar, who comes ahead and cuts the head of Lagertha's husband with his sword. Back to Kattegat, things have taken a bold turn as Ragnar orders his men to capture Jarl Borg's forces by surprise and set their camp on fire. In a fierce fight, Rollo captures Jarl Borg, who pleads for mercy. But his plea is ignored by Ragnar as Jarl Borg makes a blunder by attacking Ragnar's family. Ragnar has contemplated an eagle punishment for Jarl Borg, which proves to be very painful for him. After a few days, we see King Horik expressing concern that without Jarl Borg's ships and men, they can't effectively attack Wessex and King Egbert. Ragnar assures him that they'll find another ally who will help them and mentions he's already sent his men to search for new allies. King Horik then asks Ragnar to hold off on killing Jarl Borg until they find a replacement ally. Back in England, where King El arrives in Wessex with his family to join forces with King Egbert, he is doing this to create a plan against the Vikings. King Egbert thinks that they should not fight with the Vikings. No matter how many times the kings of England defeated these pagans, they continued to come to their land after some time. So, the only solution to this problem was to have a treaty with the Vikings, giving them some land to farm in England. In Kattegat, a soldier comes to inform Ragnar that an earl is ready to become an ally in his next raid to the west. Though Ragnar has never heard the name of this earl, he is excited to meet with him. When Ragnar goes to meet that earl in the woods alone, he sees that it is none other than his own ex-wife, Lagertha. She has taken the place of Earl by killing her husband, and now she is ready to be an ally with Ragnar for his next raids. Ragnar says that if she comes being Lagertha, then she is allowed to accompany his troops, but if she comes like a new earl, then she is not allowed to go to the west. Lagertha agrees with his playful condition promptly. Also, that night, Jarl Borg meets his fate as he is no longer needed. Jarl Borg is subjected to the horrific blood eagle execution. Ragnar tears open his body, exposing his lungs on his back, and leaves him to die a painful death as the Viking onlookers watch. The episode starts with a Slog struggling to give birth to her fourth child, but Siggy motivates her, and finally, a Slog shows great courage and successfully delivers the baby. However, Ragnar is saddened upon seeing the child because the baby is born without bones in his legs. He is boneless. The scene then shifts to Lagertha, whom King Horik urges to get her people and ships ready quickly for their journey to Wessex. Lagertha then returns to her kingdom to prepare her warriors and ships for the journey. Meanwhile, Ragnar is thinking about his boneless son's future. He suggests they should kill the baby, as such a life may bring only suffering, but a Slog refuses to do so. In Wessex, Princess Quenthrith arrives in the kingdom of King Egbert. She is the daughter of the late King of Mercia, who arrived after orchestrating the killing of her brothers to secure the throne for herself. Quenthrith suspects Egbert wants an alliance with her to help her gain Mercia's throne, which he also confirms at the dining table. For that, she wants King Egbert to attack the kingdom of her uncle and the remaining younger brother as she wants some revenge on them. But King Egbert is still not ready for this, and he wants to focus on the Vikings for the time being. In Kattegat, the Vikings bid farewell to their loved ones and set sail for Wessex. During the journey, King Horik tries to manipulate Floki into resenting Ragnar. King Horik is now planning to build his own army for the raids from the next raids as he doesn't want to be a partner with Ragnar. But for his plans, he needs some good, skillful men like Floki. The scene moves to Wessex, where the Vikings set up camp along a river. Ragnar sends his man Torstein as an emissary to King Egbert, proposing negotiations. King Horik is angered by this decision as he wants to attack King Egbert's troops just as they arrive. Also, he is the king and wants to make the decisions himself, but Ragnar does not allow him to take charge. King Horik has just come there to take his revenge on King Egbert, but Ragnar has other plans, as King Horik can't do anything against Ragnar yet, so he keeps his resentment quiet.
Oh, he will send some army to annihilate us.
After some time, the reply from King Egbert comes and his son Ethelwulf takes that message to Ragnar and his army. King Egbert is ready for the negotiations. Ethelwulf also shows the ring of Athelstan to Ragnar, showing that the priest is still alive and is under the protection of King Egbert. Seeing this, Ragnar becomes extremely happy. As the troop starts its journey back to the castle, King Horik's son ambushes Ethelwulf. He kills his men but spares Ethelwulf to send a message to King Egbert. At night, Ragnar shows his anger on King Horik's actions. He didn't want to engage in the fight because he thinks that this time the England kings must be ready for them. Ragnar also wants to set his man Athelstan free from the grip of Christians, but no other Viking care for him. The next morning, as the Vikings approach the battlefield, they see King Egbert's huge forces. While some, including Lagertha, want to wait, others push forward, and the fierce battle begins. King El and King Egbert's forces attack the Vikings collectively. Also, the Vikings didn't have the horses and modern war weapons that their enemies had, so Vikings are being brutally killed for the first time on the battlefield. Rollo was injured, but Ragnar fights on and encourages everyone not to lose hope. After some time, when he sees that the chances of their win are very minimal, he decides to back off, vowing to continue the fight another day. He calls his men to run from the battlefield while leading the injured Rollo back. Athelstan later arrives on the battlefield to act as a messenger of peace. When the soldiers of King Egbert are killing the remaining injured Vikings, Athelstan catches the eye of Rollo and asks Egbert to save this man. On the other hand, Vikings are greatly injured, and Ragnar asks King Horik to see the result of his actions. If they agreed to the negotiations, then the result would be different. But King Horik is still persistent in his stance on taking revenge on King Egbert. Lagertha also suggests that attacking the castle again in this condition would not be a good decision. Bjorn is also angry at his performance because he fought for the first time in a real war, and they lost that war. However, Ragnar assures him that he fought very well and not a single blade touched him. So Ragnar proudly names Bjorn as Bjorn Ironside for his courage in battle. On the other hand, King Egbert and King El are celebrating their victory in the pool. King El wants to kill the remaining Vikings, too, but Egbert says that it would not be the wise decision as they should make a treaty with them so that both sides would remain in peace. Athelstan acts as the peace messenger and conveys the message of King Egbert to Ragnar. Egbert was ready to give some land to the Vikings and also some treasure so that the Vikings could return to their homes. Ragnar is happy to see Athelstan, and he accompanies him on some of his routes back to the castle. Ragnar wants to save Athelstan from any potential attack by King Horik, as he did earlier on Ethelwulf. The following day, the hostages are exchanged between Vikings and King Egbert for the negotiation. King Horik, Ragnar, Lagertha, and Athelstan sit at the same table with King Egbert and the princess. King announces his offer again. He is giving land to farm for Vikings, some treasure, the return of Rollo, and also a chance for the Viking fighter to be trained at his castle by the princess's troops with no conditions asked. Ragnar and Lagertha agree to the deal without thinking twice. Soon the treasure reaches to the Vikings and they start preparing to leave the England. Ragnar asks Athelstan that he wants his friend back at his home. Athelstan also wanted this, so he accompanies the Vikings to the Kattegat. Back in Kattegat, Ragnar meets his sons and his wife. Aslog also welcomes Lagertha and Bjorn back to the house. She has also declared Porin as a free woman now, knowing that Bjorn loves her. Porin is dressed beautifully, waiting for Bjorn. Meanwhile, Rollo is now being treated in the Kattegat. Next, we see King Horik bringing his entire family to Kattegat, where Aslog greets them warmly. King Horik introduces his family to Ragnar and his family, suggesting that they unite their families through marriage since he has many daughters and Ragnar has many sons. But King Horik is still trying to brainwash Floki, who approaches Horik and asks if he has any work for him. Horik mentions that he still doesn't fully trust Floki. Then, Horik instructs Floki to prove his loyalty by killing someone significant in Kattegat as part of a plan to start a fight against Ragnar. Floki complies as he gathers some herbs from the forest, which he later uses to poison Torstein through one of Ragnar's sons. This shocks Bjorn, who swears revenge for Torstein. However, Horik feels reassured that Floki has chosen his side. Later, Horik reveals his plan to kill Ragnar and his entire family to secure their rule. Worried that if any member of Ragnar's family survives, they'll pose a threat, he hands over a knife to Siggy and orders her to kill Ragnar's family. He bribes Siggy to marry her if she finishes this job. Then King Horik presents a sword to his son, saying that it belongs to the royal family and that one day, he will be able to use this sword if he succeeds in the position of the king. When Horik's forces attack, Ragnar's followers are ready for them and fight back fiercely. In the chaos, Floki ultimately sides with Ragnar, turning against Horik and betraying him. Torstein is also alive, meaning that it was a complete setup to catch Horik red-handed. Horik, seeing his end in front of him, pleads for his son's life, which Ragnar spares. But everyone else from his family, including Horik, is executed. Finally, Bjorn finds the royal sword in Horik's room, which is now Ragnar's possession, who is now the king in the north. In the last scene, we see Ragnar in the winter season, sitting alone at a cliff thinking something about the future.